Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into website design today. But not just any website design. We're going deep on websites that are built to make a difference. Websites for social impact. It's about making your online presence a force for good. And our guide for this deep dive is a website design checklist from our reflections. Think of it like a toolkit for building a website that doesn't just look good, but also embodies your organization's values.
What's really cool about this checklist
Hmm.
is it goes way beyond the technical stuff. It really digs into the strategy behind building a website that connects with your audience and has a real impact.
It's not just about aesthetics, then, it's about purpose. Speaking of purpose, the checklist breaks it all down into 7 sections, each one like a building block for a seriously effective website. We've got planning and strategy, design and user experience, content creation, development and technology. Then there's launch and post-launch, accessibility and inclusion, and finally, final review and launch. That's quite a roadmap.
Yeah, it might seem like a lot at first glance, but that's actually the beauty of this checklist. It breaks this complex process down into manageable steps. And the best part is it really shows how all these stages are connected. Like, take the planning and strategy phase. It's not just listing out your website's features. It's about figuring out who you're trying to reach, defining your social impact goals, even understanding what other similar initiatives are out there.
So taking a step back and asking those big questions before diving into the details, but let's be honest, sometimes it's those little details that grab our attention. I noticed on Our Reflections' own website, they have digital arts collectives and digital world coaching in their navigation menu. What do you think is the reason for that?
Oh, that's a great observation because it highlights a key point. Even small things like navigation labels can send a strong message. By putting digital arts collectives front and center, they're showing their commitment to creativity and community within the digital world. And digital world coaching suggests they focus on empowering individuals, helping people navigate this complex online world. It's about using those tiny details to tell people what matters most to your organization.
Aligning the little things with your big mission. And I got to ask about the author of the checklist, Mihigo E.R. Anaja. He calls himself the author of Time and Legacy and the programmer without stress. Those are pretty interesting titles. What do you make of them?
It definitely gives you a feel for his personality. And his approach to web design, the author of Time and Legacy, suggests he's focused on building things that last, things that have a real impact, and the programmer without stress. Well, it hints that he sees technology as a way to make life better, easier. To me, it sounds like he sees web design as more than just a technical skill. It's about empowering people and communities.
That's a cool way to look at it. Web design as a force for good, it really highlights the potential of a well-designed online space.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to a really crucial part of the checklist. Section 6, accessibility and inclusion. This is where the idea of creating a website that truly serves its purpose becomes really real.
Accessibility is so important. It's often overlooked. But when we're talking about social impact, it can't be an afterthought. If your website isn't accessible to everyone, you're limiting your reach and impact.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that this checklist doesn't just treat accessibility like a box to check. It's woven in as a core design principle. It makes the user experience better for everyone.
So let's break down what it says. It talks about ensuring accessibility for people with disabilities, implementing inclusive design, providing alternative text for images and multimedia, conducting accessibility testing and audits. It's a pretty comprehensive list.
It really is. And it's important to remember, accessibility isn't just about accommodating a specific group. It's about understanding that people experience the web in different ways and designing for that, like providing alternative text for images. That doesn't just help people with visual impairments. It helps anyone using a screen reader, people with slow internet connections who might have images turned off. Even search engines use alt text to understand what's on the page.
It's like that saying, design for disability, design for everyone. Makes things better for everyone in the end.
Exactly. And this section also emphasizes that. Making your website accessible isn't a burden. A lot of these recommendations, like clear and concise language, actually make the website better for all users.
So it's not about sacrificing good design, it's about expanding our definition of what good design is.
Absolutely. It's about moving from designing for the ideal user to designing for all users.
I love that. Creating truly inclusive digital spaces.
And that goes hand in hand with Mihigo's idea of using technology to empower people and communities. By making accessibility a core part of your design, you're making sure everyone has the chance to engage with your content, and participate in the digital world.
It's about making information and opportunities available to everyone, creating a more equitable digital world. I'm really starting to see how everything connects. The emphasis on strategy, sending subtle messages through design choices, and this commitment to accessibility. It's a powerful combination.
It is. It all comes down to approaching website design with purpose. It's not just about making a pretty website, it's about building a platform that reflects your values and gives your audience a way to connect, engage, and take action. And that's really where this checklist shines. It gives you actionable steps. It's not just telling you what to do, but showing you how to actually do it.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, make your website accessible,
Hmm.
but it's another thing to actually know how to do that.
Exactly. One important area they highlight is assistive technologies, like screen readers for people with visual impairments. You got to make sure your website's code is set up so screen readers can understand and convey the information properly. For example, using heading tags and ARIA landmarks, those help screen readers users navigate the content much easier.
So it's about going beyond what you see on the screen and thinking about how someone might be experiencing the website differently.
Exactly. And it's not just screen readers. Keyboard navigation is also super important. A lot of people rely on keyboards to navigate websites, so you have to make sure that all those interactive elements, like buttons and links, can be used with just a keyboard. The checklist recommends trying it out yourself, navigating your site using only a keyboard to make sure it's a smooth experience.
That's a great point. I never really thought about that much before.
Yeah, it's easy to forget when you're used to using a mouse.
That's why testing and audits are so crucial, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And ideally, you want feedback from real users with disabilities. They can give you firsthand insights into their experience, identify any roadblocks, and suggest improvements.
Bringing in different perspectives and incorporating user feedback.
Exactly.
But technology's always changing. How do you stay ahead of the game and keep your website accessible? With new devices and assistive technologies coming out all the time.
That's where progressive enhancement comes in. It's about building a solid foundation that works for everyone, but also adding in features that take advantage of the newest tech without leaving anyone behind. So you might use JavaScript to create some cool interactive element, but you also make sure that people with JavaScript disabled can still access the core content and functionality.
So like layering those enhancements
Yeah.
without creating barriers for users who might not have the latest tech.
Exactly. It goes back to that idea of inclusive design. You're future-proofing your website, making sure it stays accessible to as many people as possible.
It's not just a technical checklist, it's a whole philosophy.
I couldn't agree more. It's about making inclusivity part of the very foundation of your website, because everyone deserves equal access to information and opportunities online.
So we've talked a lot about accessibility. It's clearly a key part of this checklist. But let's move on to the final stage. Final review and launch seems pretty straightforward, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, definitely. Launching a website isn't just about hitting publish. You have to make sure everything's in place, working smoothly, and that you're ready to maintain and update it going forward.
It's like the final dress rehearsal before the big show.
Exactly. The checklist says to do a thorough review of everything, the design, the content, how it all works technically. Test all the interactive elements, the forms, the links, and make sure it's responsive, so it looks good and works well on all devices, from desktops to mobile phones.
Right, people are browsing the web on all sorts of devices these days.
Absolutely. Mobile-first design isn't a trend anymore. It's essential. You don't just want it to be responsive. You have to think about the whole user experience on different devices. Is the text easy to read on a small screen? Are the buttons easy to tap? All important stuff to consider in that final review.
So putting yourself in the user's shoes, thinking about how they might be interacting with your website. What about the content itself? Anything specific to keep in mind during that final review?
Well, first and foremost, make sure everything's accurate and up to date, and that it aligns with your mission and values. Think about the tone and style of your writing, too. Is it engaging and accessible to your audience? Does it get your message across effectively? And are you using inclusive language? Language that reflects the diversity of your audience.
Because you could have the most beautiful and accessible design, but if the content is confusing or outdated, it defeats the purpose.
Exactly. That's why it's good to have someone else look over the content, get a fresh perspective. They might catch mistakes or spot areas that could be improved.
Makes sense.
It's like having another set of eyes to make sure everything's polished and ready to go.
So it sounds like that final review is all about the details, making sure the big picture is perfect. And then once you've checked everything and you're feeling good about your website, you hit publish. And launch it out into the world, right?
You'd think so. But the checklist actually emphasizes what happens after you launch, post-launch activities. It's about monitoring, analyzing, and constantly improving your website over time.
So it's not just a one and done thing. What does that ongoing maintenance and improvement actually look like?
One important part is getting user feedback. You can use analytics tools to see how people are using your site, do surveys, or even add feedback forms to the website itself. The goal is to understand how people interact with your site, find any pain points or confusing parts, and then use that info to make it better.
It makes sense. You put all this effort into building this amazing website, but you gotta make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, connecting with your audience.
Exactly. And this ongoing analysis and improvement is especially important for social impact websites. You want to make sure your message is reaching the right people, that your calls to action are working, that you're actually making a difference.
Holding yourself accountable to your mission.
Right. And using data to measure your impact. That data can also help you adapt as your audience changes and as the digital world evolves.
So we've covered post-launch stuff, but before we wrap up, I want to go back to the checklist's call to action. It says, if you need help with your website design or want to improve your online presence, contact Owl Reflections today to schedule a consultation and take the first step towards creating a website that drives social impact.
I love how they phrase that. They're not just offering website design services. They're presenting themselves as partners in creating social impact.
Not just a transaction, but a collaboration.
Exactly. And by focusing on driving social impact, instead of just how the website looks or functions, they're attracting people and organizations who are purpose-driven.
People who want to use their platform for good.
Absolutely. It really highlights the potential of website design. When it's done with intention and expertise, it can be a huge force for positive change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Building a website for social impact goes way beyond technical skills. It's about strategy, purpose, accessibility, and understanding your audience.
It's about creating a space for people to connect, engage, and take action.
Exactly. And while the Owl Reflections checklist is an amazing resource, ultimately it's up to each person or organization to bring their own vision and values to the process.
So to finish up, I want to leave you all with a question. What can you do today to make your online presence more aligned with what matters to you? To contribute to the change you want to see in the world. Maybe it's revisiting your website's accessibility. Maybe it's tweaking your message to reflect your mission. Or maybe it's just committing to keep learning and growing in this digital space. Whatever it is. Take that first step and use your platform for good.
And if you want to dive deeper into Owl Reflections, and the author of this checklist, Mihigo Anaja, check out the links in the show notes. You can explore their website, learn about their projects, even reach out to them directly. It's a great resource for anyone passionate about tech and social impact.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into website design for social impact. We hope you found it valuable. Until next time, keep exploring.